AM 560, The Answer.
Get the latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. Should Chicago residents fear the National Guard? Should they fear ICE? Should they come to the realization there's nothing that the National Guard or ICE can do that will improve peace on the streets? What we need to focus on is affordable housing and violence interrupters and no cash bail. That's what's going to make things safer. That's the argument that JB and BJ offered yesterday at their joint press conference. JB saying this about ICE, but you can fold in National Guard because it's all the same ghost story that's being told.
Second, unidentifiable agents in unmarked vehicles with masks are planning to raid Latino communities and say they're targeting violent criminals. As we saw in Los Angeles, a very, very small percentage of the individuals they will target will be violent criminals. Instead, you're likely to see videos of them hauling away mothers and fathers, traveling to work or picking up their kids from school. Sometimes they will detain, handcuff, and haul away children. They are law-abiding individuals who pay taxes and contribute to the communities who feel safe going to work and attending mandatory immigration check-ins. In other words, they're following the law. We have reason to believe that Stephen Miller chose the month of September to come to Chicago because of celebrations around Mexican Independence Day that happen here every year. It breaks my heart to report that we have been told ICE will try and disrupt community picnics and peaceful parades. Let's be clear, the terror and cruelty is the point, not the safety of anyone living here.
Picked Mexican Independence Day. Well, that's not for 2 weeks. That's September 16th, isn't it? Do I have that right? I think so. But anyway, terror and cruelty, that's the point. Not law enforcement. Not public safety. ICE, and by extension, the National Guard, because the National Guard would be there to, in part, protect ICE's backside, if you will. Their point, the point of their deployment, the point of their existence is to terrorize the law-abiding and act in a cruel manner to Chicago residents and ostensibly people everywhere they go. It's an interesting characterization of federal law enforcement, of everyday Americans who serve in the National Guard and who work amongst us. It's responsible, isn't it? Somebody who represents some of those Latino neighborhoods, like Back of the Yards, Canaryville, Gage Park, Brighton Park, is Alderman Ray Lopez, who joins us now. Alderman Lopez, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Dan, good morning.
What's your reaction to what the governor had to say? Is he right, his characterization of ICE and by extension National Guard, that the point of them is to behave cruelly and terrorize people?
I don't think he's right at all. I think Governor Pritzker and by extension Brandon Johnson are completely off base, especially when it comes to Latino undocumented communities. These are the same individuals who wanted to play a game of chicken with Donald Trump over whether or not to allow our law enforcement officers to communicate with them when we arrest a non-citizen engaging in certain dangerous crimes in our city. They said, if you want them, come find them. Well, guess who arrives this week? Donald Trump to come find them. And he's putting all of the longtime undocumented, predominantly Mexican immigrants at risk when they could have easily turned over the 2,000 Venezuelan migrants whom Biden identified as threats to our country that are living in the city of Chicago, when we could have turned those over months ago and spared us this giant show today.
Yeah. In addition to not honoring detainers, ICE detainers, which has been something that Tom Homan has long publicly lamented, we could do things much more safely and much more easily in a law enforcement setting rather than having to take it to the streets. But you're forcing us to do this. It's not our preference. You have CPS that sent out an email this week. CPS does not ask our family's immigration status, will not coordinate with federal representatives, including ICE, does not share student records with ICE, will not allow ICE agents or any federal representatives access to CPS schools unless they produce a criminal judicial warrant signed by a judge, and so on and so forth. I mean, all of this is the sort of obstructionist rhetoric that you hear from JB and BJ. And so now again, you're conceding the point that people are here illegally. You're conceding the point that some people here illegally have also committed additional crimes, and you're saying we're not going to help. And then when ICE comes in to go through you, as JB famously said, then you say, oh, it's authoritarianism, and they're disappearing grandmas and arresting children.
Yeah, it's a ridiculous contortion of linguistics that they're doing right now. But it's great to gaslight my communities and spread anxiety in my neighborhoods for the sake of their performance of showing that they are standing up to Donald Trump. But you know what they always seem to miss the point is two things. One, they talk about Donald Trump as bending the law or avoiding the Constitution and so on and so forth. But where was that argument when Joseph Biden and Kamala Harris led in millions of individuals, manipulated our immigration laws, and broke our asylum rules to get millions of people into this country in the hopes that they'd have a full another term to try to figure out how to make them citizens? No one had anything bad to say about that setup. And when we also look at the fact that we keep hearing as another reason for why we don't need President Trump's assistance, whether it's the National Guard or the rest of the federal agencies under his control, they say that crime is down, crime is decreasing, all is good. I had a gentleman shot walking down the alley last night in back of the yards, 2 bullets in his head. I had 2 teenagers by Tilden High School in Canaryville last Friday walking home, shot by a Venezuelan migrant. You know what I haven't heard from Pritzker, Johnson, or anybody else? The names of these victims, calling out for the families, or anyone saying that that is not right in our neighborhoods. They are happy to concede that they are able to live with a certain amount of victims per year because we don't have to go any further. I say that we should challenge the Donald Trump administration and say, if you can do better than us, let's see what you can do. Because at the end of the day, that means more people will not be victimized in the city of Chicago if we're all pushing for the same thing, which is to have crime decrease even beyond the decrease. Well,
that's sort of what JB said when he was waddling along the lakefront with Marianne Ahern. Listen to this response to the violence over Labor Day weekend.
You're going to hear people, especially this past weekend, 54 shot, 7 dead. Yeah. They're going to say the city's not safe. Would you ask your friends to ride the L after midnight or after, 9 o'clock at night even to come down to the city from O'Hare?
Look, big cities have crime. There's no doubt about it. But let's just pay attention to what President Trump is doing targeting Chicago. He's overlooking red states that have much higher crime rates.
So it's just big city living, and we're not as bad as red states. That's not true, but that's the excuse for 50. I think it's actually 58 shots, 7 dead over the weekend.
I don't really care about the whataboutisms as the governor's trying to deflect with, because all I can live with is the community that I was raised in, the ward I was elected by, and the city that I love. That is my only concern. I don't care what's going on in Memphis. I don't care what's going on in Tallahassee or any of the other red states that have or cities that have worse crime stats than we do. I have to deal with the Chicago situation right in front of us, and I think it's a dereliction of duty, if you will, for any elected official here to say, well, yeah, we got problems, but look at over there. I don't want to look over there because I have to look at what's right in front of me. And when I have individuals being kicked down L stations and their children die as a result, when you can't even walk down Michigan Avenue without wondering if you're going to get mugged as a tourist, or if I have to drive down Western Avenue and see how many traffic takeovers, street takeovers that go on by the amount of skid marks in the street. Those are all perceived problems that have real roots. And to just keep ignoring them, to paper over them so that you can point the finger at Trump and say he's the bad guy, or that gun manufacturers are the bad guy while ignoring the people that are doing bad things, that's a serious disconnect that only allows for criminality to continue to fester in our city.
Yeah, I mean, it's, and by the way, on the L, I mean, I'm sure you've seen these videos going around on social media, too, a couple of weeks after the big executive order where BLM Brandon said no more smoking on the trains, and these trains look like scenes from a Cheech and Chong movie. So I don't think it's quite getting through. But, you know, I know, you know, executive orders are supposed to magically eliminate problems, but that's not actually how it works. I wonder what the reaction you get from your constituents, because, you know, you're taking, I mean, the way that you talk doesn't sound dissimilar from the way that I talk, and I don't know that I could get elected in the 15th Ward. So I just wonder if you take heat for being so, even though it's substantive, being critical of Pritzker and Johnson.
Pritzker and Johnson aren't my constituents. My constituents are the folks in the neighborhoods that you mentioned earlier at the start of this segment, who want to feel safe in their communities, who want to feel safe going to work, dropping their kids off, or just sitting on their porch enjoying the summer afternoon. And right now they can't do that. They know that I'm fighting for them, and they understand that, you know, what you hear from our higher ups doesn't match reality for those of us on the ground, and they want someone who's going to just give it to them plainly. And yes, we understand, and they appreciate that I acknowledge that the National Guard isn't a panacea. The National Guard has no policing authority, but they can help us alleviate some of the pressure on local law enforcement so that they could focus on answering those 911 calls that my residents often make that go unanswered. Mm-hmm. So they understand how to connect the dots to get to a logical conclusion, where Pritzker and Johnson like to just halt the conversation after the first two talking points and ignore everything else after that.
The other sort of moment of clarity this week was Brandon Johnson on the Morning Joe program, where he was offered hypothetically 5,000 police officers funded by the feds. Would he take them? 5,000 local police officers who would have local policing power as members of the Chicago Police Department. And he bobbed and weaved and basically dismissed the idea 5 different times. I mean, that is such a tell, as I mentioned earlier in the program, that this isn't about the National Guard and militarization. It's not about the Constitution. It's not even about Trump. It is an attitude, an ideologically fueled attitude that is against policing, prosecuting, and punishing. And that's what we're really seeing play out, it seems to me.
I 100% agree, Dan, that this has nothing to do with any of the rhetoric that they talk about. This is about making sure that criminals have the upper hand, victims are forgotten, and that we change the dynamic in the city of Chicago and indeed the greater state of Illinois, where we continue to elevate criminality at every level. A different, more liberal program I was on said, well, wouldn't it be better to use the money being spent on the National Guard to hire more police? And the fact of the matter is that even if you gave Brandon Johnson the opportunity to hire 5,000 officers, he would never fill those positions.
Right.
We have 1,500 positions vacant already within the police department across just from the detectives on down to the police officers that he won't fill. And that's a problem, which is all the more reason why the National Guard is needed here, because we spend countless man hours protecting Buckingham Fountain, Navy Pier, the Bean, Mag Mile, and whatnot. We can use the National Guard's uniform presence to do that and put hundreds of officers back into the streets, back into communities like mine, answering those 911 calls and putting bad guys in jail. That's the coordinated effort we need to do. And anyone who says that that's not worth the effort clearly has never lived in a neighborhood where you're terrorized every single day by those thugs in our streets.
Just on Brandon Johnson, too, I mean, another topic, but sort of the same MO. The battle he had with the CPS school board, where he wanted them to take out, he and Stacey Davis Gates, CTU president, wanted them to take out a $200 million high interest loan, which would have resulted in, CPS is already the biggest junk bond purveyor in the country. This would have further degraded the creditworthiness of CPS and the city by extension. But this is what he said and he lost this fight, by the way. They wouldn't agree to this $200 million high interest loan to keep the plate spinning at CPS. This is what he said to those who were opposed to what he desired.
These individuals were reckless. Let's call it like it is. When you put a black man in charge of a city, all of a sudden, everybody wants to be an accountant.
If you oppose the $200 million high interest loan, it's when you put this is what he said, when you put a black man in charge of the city, everybody all of a sudden wants to become an accountant, despite the fact that many members of the CPS board are black, and who opposed him. The CPS intern superintendent is black, who opposed him. But it's always the race card with this guy.
Every single time. And if I were a black woman, seeing a black woman in a leadership role being talked down to for opposing him simply because he's a black man, I'd be outraged. When a Latino leader did the same thing that she did, he was fired. You know, people are tired of his excuses. They're tired of him falling back on the race card because that's all he really has at this point. And that's the only way that he has a path forward to re-election, if he blames everything on the man standing up to him because he's black. Mm-hmm. Well, I've got news for the mayor. He is the man. He is the one in charge. It'd be nice if he grew up and learned how to use the powers that the people of Chicago have given him. But he'd rather play the victim always and say that everything is falling apart around him, not because of his lack of effort, follow-through, or knowledge, but because there's some mysterious force still going after him because he's African-American. And he and I had a conversation a couple months ago, one of the rare conversations that we had, and it was about development in my ward, which his administration was fumbling. And when I called to question him and his team about it, he very quickly resorted to people only question me because I'm a black man in this role. And I'm like, I've worked with a Jewish mayor, a black lesbian mayor, and you. None of this has ever crossed my mind. I'm from a different generation, but yet I've been accused by him of being a descendant of the Confederacy, a supporter of all of this crap. And I'm like, my people weren't even, my family arrived here 100 years after the Confederacy. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh.
But I think what's truly remarkable is that even the African-American communities, African-American residents and communities all across Chicago are fed up with this excuse, because it looks as though a strong black man can't do anything without relying on the race card. And to be perfectly honest with you, he has even failed his own community by not being able to deliver and uplift them when he has control of every level of power here in the city of Chicago. What a failure.
Yeah, and by the way, he could use an accountant so that he could make sure he pays his city water bill on time, too. I mean, just a little bit of professional help on that. Ray Lopez is the alderman for the 15th Ward. Alderman Lopez, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, Dan.
And Alderman Lopez joined us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer.
Your show keeps me alive during the week. There's nobody I'd rather listen to between 5 and 9 in the morning than you guys.
On AM 560, The Answer.
You know what really keeps me up at night? It's the criminals feel more and more bold. They have no fear of any consequences because there are none. So I did what anyone with a family should do. I called Goldilocks. They're not just some cookie-cutter security company. Goldilocks has been protecting Chicagoland homes and businesses for 4 decades, 40 years. And they actually listen. Their technician comes out to the house. He takes a look at what you need to make your house a smart home with a security system you can monitor from anywhere. It's built specifically